History will not be kind to Donald Trump. I think we all know that. Not because it will be written by never-Trumpers, but because whenever we have departed from the values of our nation, we have come to regret it, and that regret is written all over the pages of our history. If you find that the House has proved its case and still vote to acquit, your name will be tied to his with a cord of steel and for all of history. But if you find the courage to stand up to him, to speak the awful truth to his rank falsehood, your place will be among the Davids who took on Goliath. If only you will say enough. Like a pendulum approaching the end of its arc, the outward movement begins to arrest. The golden globe of freedom reaches its zenith and starts to retreat. The pendulum swings back past the center and recedes into a dark unknown. How much farther it will travel in its illiberal direction, how many more freedoms will be extinguished before it turns back, we cannot say. But what we do here in this moment will affect its course and its correction. Every single vote, even a single vote by a single member, can change the course of history. It is said that a single man or woman of courage makes a majority. Is there one among you who will say enough?
Obviously, that the House manager, Adam Schiff, who has been really the voice for impeachment, he's attempted to do everything from trying to shame lawmakers into exercising rights imbued in them by our founders in terms of being that check and balance, that co-equal branch. He's tried also to go right to the language of the founding fathers, and then obviously all the evidence from the transcript to all the witnesses. But yet, nonetheless, he's made little, if any, progress in convincing any senators, forget to vote for impeachment, but to even vote for witnesses. So to that end, I want to speak to one of the people who will be casting a vote tomorrow. That is our next guest, Senator Richard Blumenthal. He's a Democrat from Connecticut, and he sits on the Judiciary Committee. And Senator, in getting ready to talk to you, I thought about a bizarre, maybe perfect analogy for the week that was. You were in Connecticut as Attorney General when then Governor Rowland was caught up in a corruption scheme where basically, to paraphrase, he misappropriated a little more than $100,000 for some personal benefits for himself. He rightfully lost his job, he lost his freedom, he got 10 months in prison, and his reputation as well. We now see a situation where you add a bunch of zeros to it, and again, if not for personal benefits, certainly for personal political benefit, the president's going to get ready to go to the stage tonight and claim vindication. Just how surreal has this past week been for you?
The president tonight may claim vindication. He may be boastful and even bellicose, but in fact there is no vindication, no acquittal in a supposed trial that had no evidence, no witnesses, no documents, because the president blocked them and my Republican colleagues chose to put blinders on. You can't complain about what you can't see if you put blinders on. And so I truly believe that this so-called trial will have a great big stamp, non-trial, because no evidence. And the effort to hold accountable a president who corruptly abuses power and then tries to cover up is something that we had to do as the United States Senate. We have a constitutional responsibility. I think that history will haunt my Republican colleagues who chose to be complicit in the cover-up.
You know, about a week and a half ago, Senator, when the first excerpts of the Bolton book were coming out, and certainly the rumblings we heard, at least from the Hill, it seemed it was a question of how many, not if there were 4 Republican senators that would have joined Democrats, to at least demand to hear from witnesses. Were there 4 members ever there at what point? What happened? What changed where those votes became, yeah, he did something wrong here, but let's just move along?
The lesson of recent history, and maybe history as a whole, is the truth comes out. John Bolton's book will be out in mid-March, and the courts will continue to issue orders under the Freedom of Information Act, and the press will continue to uncover the truth. And so my Republican colleagues will have to face the truth and face the voters who will know they refused to see the truth, to demand those documents and evidence before the end of the trial.
Senator, I've heard you speak on this issue, and you've spoken from both student history, but also someone who appreciates the law. To me, the thing most concerning out of all this wasn't if there was a conviction or not at the end of the day. It's that you guys are intended to be the check and balance in a co-equal branch of government to a president. And the founding fathers, to my view at least, very clearly said that, and they even give an example of foreign, interference with an election that's solicited. How worried are you about the precedent that's been set right now where there's basically nothing a commander-in-chief can do that would cause removal from office, and how this will seemingly liberate the president to do whatever he wants or can even conceive between now and November?
The Congress has to renew and reinvigorate its role as a check on the president. The president's made a claim to absolute immunity. He can completely stonewall Congress. The courts have rejected it and have said, in effect, the president is not a king. He's not a monarch. He's claimed executive privilege gives him the right to refuse information to Congress. But he is wrong, because there's no executive privilege for crime or fraud. And he has waived that executive privilege. So the president, in effect, is misusing and distorting the law. The Congress has to reassert its power, because the framers envisioned Congress as an effective check on the president, a source of accountability and oversight.
Senator, you're privy to conversations none of us are. You're one of 100. I'm sure you've talked without the cameras on to your colleagues. I'm not going to ask you to name them by name here, but what do they say to you when you say, guys, the book's going to come out? You heard the witnesses that already testified. You see the rogues gallery of folks that are involved with this. What possible logic could we do to not hear, at least from the witnesses? Is this about the political calendar, the fear of being on the wrong end of a Trump tweet? Why do they basically say there's nothing to see here, let's move along?
My colleagues are going to have to answer to history, but they'll have to answer the voters even before. And one question they're going to have to answer is why they refuse to subpoena John Bolton, whose book will be out on March 17th, unless the president succeeds in censuring him. And John Bolton's book, along with the notes of conversations, the internal communications, the messages between Ambassador Taylor and the State Department, between Fiona Hill and her colleagues, all of these documents, along with other witness testimony like Mick Mulvaney, who was in the room when the president issued the order to withhold aid from Ukraine, Robert Blair and Michael Duffy, who carried out those orders, and of course Bolton, who tried to talk the president out of soliciting, in effect, a bribe from Ukraine by demanding that it do a phony investigation of a political rival in return for release of that aid, the $400 million in taxpayer-appropriated money that was obligated to go to Ukraine and the president withheld, along with a presidential meeting with the president of Ukraine. All of these facts and all of the evidence and the witnesses and documents have been, in effect, blocked, and my Republican colleagues will have to answer those questions to the American people.
Senator Blumenthal, thank you so much for the time.
Thank you.
Now, if you think that this is strictly, well, Republicans want one thing and Democrats want the other, and whatever you see on Capitol Hill reflects wherever it is across the country, you should note, I mean, the former chief of staff of the president, John Kelly, said We should have heard from Bolton. And he was asking Republican lawmakers to vote that way. He was the chief of staff less than a year ago. Think about that, okay? But there are others, including John Warner, a longtime Republican senator from Virginia. And when the subject of witnesses came out, he said, I believe, as I'm sure you do in a piece that he wrote, that not only is the president on trial, but in many ways, so is the Senate itself. I respectfully urge the Senate to be guided by the rules of evidence and follow our nation's judicial norms, precedents, and institutions to uphold the Constitution and the rule of law by welcoming relevant witnesses and documents as part of the impeachment trial. Not long ago, he said, senators of both major parties always work to accommodate fellow colleagues with differing points of view to arrive at outcomes that would best serve the nation's interest. Now, there was a piece in The Atlantic that caught my eye that talks about the erosions of those checks and balances that you heard from both Senator Blumenthal and then echoed also by Senator Warner. And the piece says in part, quote, if the nation's founders didn't want to constrain the president's power, they wouldn't have put impeachment into the Constitution. But what's happening in the Senate suggests the exact opposite, that most of the checks and balances Congress provided against the president's power are effectively gone. I'm among the many constitutional scholars who believe that the viability of our constitutional system of separated powers is in great peril. And I'm going to get your phones right now, but I will tell you more than the president staying or going, and more than how the vote shook out or anything else. To me, the biggest danger out of all of this is, and you know, it's no secret if you watch this program, I have questions about the president's both decency, propriety, but also concern about the office he holds in the country he serves, that he doesn't put himself always before national interests. It's always himself. That said, new rules came out of this that don't just start and stop with Ukraine. Going further, what do you think he's going to do for the balance of this term, in the run-up to the election, that he wouldn't cheat again? And what do you think, if he is reelected, he would be capable and feeling emboldened to do again? Let's go to the phone lines and start off with Joe. He's calling us from Trenton. Joe, thank you for holding. You're on the line.
Hi. I believe the country's not in good shape. He alienates our allies. He encourages dictators, and he's friendly with dictators. He listens to Putin more than he listens to his own people. You know, we have our own intelligence agencies, and the Middle East wasn't good when he got it, but he's made it even worse. And you never know. He pushes people so far. You never know when one of them are going to snap, and we're going to have something really terrible happen.
Look how close it came with Iran. Let's go to Donna Danish calling us from New Jersey. You're on the line. Go ahead, Donna.
Hello?
Yes, you're on the line.
Hi, Richard. It's good to hear your show. I love watching you and the people you interface with. This gentleman that's in the White House, following up on what that other fellow said, Trump might turn out to be a Russian asset because of what he's doing. My question is, do we still have a country after tomorrow? I mean, isn't the Constitution supposed to mean something?
You know, he just put his finger on, for me, which is I have been so wrong about so many things the last 3 years, and I always prided myself, and this job has afforded me the ability to see a lot of this country, see a lot of people, different voters, different perspectives, obviously different parties. And I thought there were lines that none of us would cross, and that while there was a lot of things that divided us on a lot of different reasons, there were things that we still had connective tissue on. And I'm coming to you from New York, impacted like so many people in this region and in this country by 9/11. I saw firsthand what this country was capable in the aftermath of that tragedy. And I always held firm that they would see through a person who was in it for number one, who, you know, forget about never read the Constitution, never understood it, and nobody would let us or let themselves be played by that. But I've been wrong. But to me, anybody who thinks that this is just another crazy week in Washington, you do it at your own peril. Now, the president's not going to be removed from office, but he was impeached in the House. Will he be chagrined tonight? Of course he won't. But what the Senate did by not doing anything is they sent a message to someone who doesn't understand lines. Go do whatever you want. Just don't tweet about me. And what that means going forward in this country, and the destruction of norms, as our last caller just touched on, is really concerning to me, because I don't know what the rules are anymore. I always knew the rules. I'm confused as to what they are anymore. All right. When we come back, we're going to get to many more of your phone calls, and also we'll hear from more lawmakers on the Hill as to what they believe the State of the Union is tonight, and obviously that all-important impeachment vote slated for tomorrow afternoon. Your calls, much more after this.